My name is Daniel Benjamin from St. Michael's University School. Today, we will debate whether those working in environmentally harmful industries should quit their jobs if it helps protect the environment. This house firmly believes that people working in these environmentally harmful industries should quit their jobs because since evidently the industries are environmentally harmful, it will protect the environment. I will discuss the long and short-term beneficial effects that this move would have on the economy, while my partner Sebastian Bixby will discuss the effects working in these industries have on workers. And finally, Aidan McKay will summarize these points. Now for my argument. One of the main concerns for a move like this is the impact that this mass resignation would have on the economy. One would think that it would have a detrimental impact, as these companies that are environmentally harmful hold a large proportion of sway on the economy. For example, oil companies probably have a large proportion of the energy economy. But in fact, there are also other alternatives to these companies. Going back to the idea of oil companies, you could go into renewable energy. These workers would move from these environmentally harmful industries to those that are not environmentally harmful, thus not actually having that big of an impact on the economy because there would be a gradual transfer from environmentally harmful to environmentally beneficial. While there may be an initial small shock to the system, it would evidently be offset by the impact that these people would have more jobs, more workers, and these new jobs would open up to facilitate these workers. Right now, there are many subsidies and not subsidies, many restrictions on fossil fuel companies and companies that harm the environment, as governments are trying to make these less appealing to consumers and to people who would invest in these companies. This would allow moving from these restricted jobs to more open, renewable jobs that often get subsidized by the government and are more open to expansion in the future. Obviously, fossil fuels are not renewable, and these jobs are close-ended, even for those who own these companies. So this catalyst would cause workers to move and also for these employers to look in how they could improve in the future and move forward into different sources of jobs. These environmentally harmful industries would see how all their jobs, all their workers are quitting. So they would have to, if they wanted to be profitable, they would have to move to another industry. And then this would move investments from one sphere of the economy into another sphere and allow for not that large of an impact on the overall economy. That is the bulk of my argument. And now I will cede my time to my partner.
So good morning, agitator and the opponent team. I'm the first speaker from the negative team for the motion that should people working in harmful industries quit their jobs if it helps protect the environment. So I'm the first speaker from the negative team, which believe the motion is not true. So before getting into my argument, I want to give some rebuttals to the first speaker of the affirmative team. So you have said that new jobs new jobs would open up to the workers if they quit their jobs in the harmful industry. So I don't agree with this point because there are still a lot of workers working in factories recently, but the world is still suffering from shortage of job. So I believe that it would be worse if all the workers quit their recent job in the industry. So as the first speaker of the negative team, I will show you that we'll have to face the problem of lack of jobs, and it will cause negative impacts on the workers. And our second speaker will show you the effect to the economy of the nation. And our third speaker will conclude and rebut. To my first argument, we will face the problem of lack of jobs, and it will cause negative impacts on the workers. So if everyone leaves their jobs to protect the environment and to protect the nature, our Earth will suffer from an increasing manpower shortage and job shortage. And this will lead to a decrease in the economic growth rate of each country, and work in the factory seems to be easy, to be simple, but it requires a lot of human resources because we will have to get through many different processing stages to create the best products. Moreover, if workers leave their job, it will take a long time before they can find a new one. Therefore, economic problems will affect their lives. In addition, factory workers are often people who do not have the same good living conditions as the rich. They are not highly educated or only educated in a single field. So it is even harder for them to find a new job. So the economic problems and personal finances is even more of a challenge for them. So because of the reason above, the negative team against the motion today. Thank you.
Everyone, my name is Sebastian Bixby, and I am the second speaker in support of this motion. So the fossil fuel industry is looking forward into the future. Governments are working, maybe not hard enough, but they certainly are, to make sure that that fossil fuel companies and other polluting industries are not as profitable or as competitive as clean energy companies. Not only do fossil fuel corporations, they have negative impacts upon the earth, so the governments are putting forward policies such as carbon taxes or subsidizing green energy corporations to make sure that there is not as much of a competition between the fossil fuel industries or other polluting industries and green energy industries. So this means that either the companies have to transfer to green energy, which is a positive impact, or that they're likely to go bankrupt in the near future. This means that it will be a drastic and dramatic and negative impact upon their workers. So through 2026, green energy is predicted to account for about 95% of energy growth. This means that there is massive potential in new jobs through the green energy, and it would be beneficial for fossil fuel workers to jump on this boom while it is still happening, then in the future look back on it and wish they had joined it while they have lost their jobs from the fossil fuel industry. Another main reason that the fossil fuel workers or other polluting workers should quit their jobs is the massive negative impact that it has on the workers themselves directly. Fossil fuel industries are harmful to the atmosphere, but they're also very harmful to people who directly inhale them. For example, their coal mining has massive negative impacts upon their miners, upon their lungs, and rates of lung diseases and cancer are much higher among coal miners than non-coal miners. And these general statistics apply to other workers in fossil fuel or other polluting industries. So finally, the massive impacts of climate change. Climate change is going to affect everyone, and this includes the workers who are now in polluting industries. So they are not going to be exempt, but they can have a role in making sure it isn't as bad for themselves and everyone else. Climate change is simply too much of a danger to risk, and the fossil fuel workers or other workers in other polluting industries should quit their jobs to make sure that it is not as bad as it could be. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone, I'm a second speaker from the negative teams. So we are here today to believe that, against that, people working in environmentally harmful industry should quit their jobs if it helps protect the environment. So first of all, I will come to my rebuttal. So the first speaker of the affirmative have said that to change job that harms the environment to non-harmful jobs to environment. But however, those will still need to sustain to maintain the economy for the whole country. And even if they quit, they would find difficult to find a new job as because it will be less work, so they will be more competitive to find jobs. Moreover, the second speaker have said that the green energy will have a massive potential, but however, fossil fuels still need to sustain and it cannot be removed completely because it still play an important role in our daily life. We still need petrol to run a car, to run a motor, and even if we replace it at like electricity energy, but however, it cannot like cover it because like in developing countries, people cannot afford cannot afford it, and I'm sure that green energy cannot supply enough, such as much as fossil fuels. So let's welcome to my my agreement that we all know that fossil fuels extraction is bad for environments because of the emissions like CO2 or carbon dioxide, methane. But however, we cannot impose the regulations for people to completely quit this kind of jobs. Why? Because it will affect to a whole economy of the country. Because coal was indispensable to a whole country. They were able to win many of their struggles. The structure power of coal miners play a significant role in creation of democratic economies based on upon the disruption of the fruits of fossil fuel based industry, and it will impact directly to the import and the export of fossil fuels. So like the conventional wisdom is that environmental regulation impose significant costs on private industry, slow productivity growth, and thereby hinder the ability of the company to compete in the international markets. This lost competitiveness is believed to reflect in declining export and increased imports, and a long-term movement of manufacturing capacities to other countries in the world. And here's an example that it will affect to the stock market because of the fossil fuels, and the idea that the stock market valuation of the fossil fuels company has been inflated by overestimating the worth of the reserve oil, coal, and gas that would only exploit by putting a climate at risk is unlikely. Even that investors are full of fossil fuels at once, the result would be much worse than the collapse of Lehman Brothers in September in 1908, a colossal stock market crash followed by the equally epic slump. And the reason for engaging in this kind of work are far from irrational. Such jobs provide income and often identify and a sense that one is contribute to societies. So all this making organizers workers exceedingly difficult if they have to quit their jobs. Thank you for listening.
All right, honorable judges, esteemed opponents, and fellow members of the affirmative side. Today, we have engaged in this debate on the topic of whether or not people working in environmental industry should quit their jobs if it helps to protect the environment. Here on side proposition, or here on side affirmative, we have repeatedly stated the future economic benefits rather than the current economic benefits. We've looked at how this how if this resolution stands, it will lead to an increase in green energy. And we've also looked at the effects on workers, whereas side negative has repeatedly failed to address these points, just citing the current effects on the economy. So now I would like to get into our summary of the debate. First of all, the first affirmative speaker began our debate by talking about the economic impact of climate change on the economies around the world and how green economies help to future-proof almost our economies to help them last for longer in the future. He addressed the problem of oil wells running out and how oil is not or petrol is not sustainable for the future. Eventually, oil will run out, and this is a problem that we are currently facing in many countries. People depend too much on oil, and we need to shift towards green energy. If this resolution stands and people start to quit, these oil companies will see the need to move to renewable energy. It will create the push that we need to become a greener society. Currently, the technology exists. We have solar panels, we have nuclear technology, we have wind and water. Across all of these, any country in the world will be able to generate enough energy to sustain themselves. I believe it was mentioned by side negative that developing countries will have a harder time with this. But we can look at the example of the Middle East. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran are they're effectively petrostates. They depend on petrol to keep their economy running and for their energy needs. But look at their geographic situation. They're in one of the sunniest, hottest areas in the world. And if they can utilize solar energy to generate electricity, then they can sustainably support themselves. So to say that countries will find it impossible to move to renewable energies is invalid. Now on to the second affirmative speaker, who spoke more about the effects it would have on workers. It is very true that people who work in environmentally harmful industries also find harm to themselves. He brought up the example of coal miners. Coal miners are almost notorious for striking, as coal mines are some of the worst places to work for anywhere. In the UK, coal miners have repeatedly striked on bad working conditions because of how brutal it is to mine coal and what it does to the lungs. Not to mention the environmental impact. You can also look at rare earth mining in Africa, which is terrible for the environment, but it's also very hard on the workers. If these people leave their jobs, it's not only better for themselves, they're also saving the environment. Just to summarize, the environment cannot be ignored. By the year 2050, it is predicted that over $23 trillion annually will be lost because of climate change. Every year, new temperature records are set, and if we do not address this soon, then the economic fallout could be worse than anything caused by a shift in jobs. Thank you very much.
Employment rates just continue to rise, and the lack of work has led to the unemployed taking whatever jobs that they can get hands on. And as we look at the face behind the numbers, we are joined by Jason Reed, who lost his job as a carpenter and was evicted out of his apartment, and is now living with his wife with 3 boys in a motorhome in Westerly, Iceland. And also on the show is Tom Carford, who used to work as a paralegal, making $4,100 a year, and he is now working as an insurance agent, barely making ends meet. Good morning, Ms. Adjudicator and the opponent team. The motion for our debate is that should people working in environmentally harmful industry quit their jobs if it helps protect the environment? And we, the opposition team, strongly believe that they should not quit their job. So now let's come to my rebuttals. So the opponent team have given a point that we will have an alternative substitute, for example, like renewable energies to replace fossil fuels. Yes, so I agree that you guys can use renewable energy with its benefits, and citizens can reap benefits from these alternative sources. However, if you guys replace fossil fuels, so can your team give us like how can we run our vehicles without using fossil fuels? And if not, so why should we need to believe in your argument? And also, you guys see that nowadays there are many restrictions on companies that harm the environment. However, we think that it is false because according to the statistic of Harvard Business Review, it has been estimated that the finding in countries with environmental regulation, companies have lowered 29% of domestic emissions on average. And on the other hand, such a regulation results in 43% higher emissions abroad. So therefore, we think that restriction on companies that harm to the environment here is unfeasible, and we still advocate that people need to work in that environmental industries. And also, you guys say that there are massive impact on negative impact on the environment. Like it is very harmful. It contains many chemical pollutants. I also agree with this point. However, so can you guys assure that if they quit their jobs, so the environment cannot be polluted? And we think that it is false because, for example, like if they quit their job and they recruit for other companies, and then if you were the employers, and then you look at the profile of them that they have been working as workers in a environmental polluted companies. So will you guys admit them into your companies? And also, if they stop working, so citizens, local residents still do the environment a disservice. Some simple actions like they throw rubbish into the rivers, so and into the streets, so it can lead to the dirty water accumulation, and in the long run, it will lead to the water contamination and air pollution. So through this point, we want to assure that the environment cannot be back and cannot be fresher if people quit their jobs at the harmful industries. And also, your team give us some like substitute like solar panels and wind power and generate it. However, it is just true for some hot countries, as your team mentioned, that in Vietnam, for example, we have planned to use solar panel, wind power to replace the fossil fuels. But however, we haven't accomplished this plan because due to the infrequency of the sun appears in Vietnam. So with all the aforementioned, we think that people should not quit their job when in environmentally harmful industries. Thank you for listening.